Do I get tired of it? I accept my reality. There's a lot of interest playing the games.
As long as my Saturday feels like a college football Saturday, it doesn't affect me.
But when people want to lecture me about responsibility for the game, I'm like, hey, we expanded the playoff, which gave you opportunity.
But that gives them, if you're a 10 seed, you have a chance to win.
Gives you hope. Relates to being an SEC champion. I resist being the center of a conversation. I don't know how to ask the question, much less answer the question of just not playing football.
It's Hot Mic with the Commish as well. Commissioner Greg Sankey. Good to see you.
Yep, good to be with you.
Starting off the show with plenty to talk about. The business of football. You get tired of talking about the business of football?
It's reality.
I know,
so
but
do I get tired of it? I accept my reality. I do think there's a lot of interest in playing the games, actually.
Yes.
Now,
I agree.
All the other stuff on the outside of the sidelines, boundary lines, you have to talk about. But
so I
said
earlier this week, as long as my Saturday feels like a college football Saturday, I really don't. It doesn't affect me. The big decisions, the money-making decisions, as long as I feel like it's still college football as the fabric of it, I'm okay. Do you agree?
No, there's fairness in that observation. I think there are limits to that, in my opinion.
Okay.
And I've talked about, you think about the tradition of college athletics where a young person builds a legacy, builds a community during their time. That's changed. When I'm approached by people at an airport or in a restaurant, the two most frequently asked questions are, the first one is, what are you going to do about the transfer portal? And I think that speaks to that legacy in that community. Now, what can we work out there? And then you got to get this NIL under control. And I think those are both linked issues. But it speaks to kind of the character of college athletics. I do acknowledge, hey, if I can go see the uniforms, feel it, they're young people, how do you define that? That's changed.
Sure.
Hey, that's great. And, I still think college athletics has a responsibility to be different than just straight out professional sports. But if it feels the same, I think it resonates with people.
I've always applauded your transparency and at least you go on and do interviews. You talk, especially at events like this. And there's been so much talk about in leadership positions, when to speak and when not to speak. Oftentimes, right? Like, oh, this person's talking, so they're being transparent. But this person's not talking, so they're not just saying things and getting people all worked up. Is that a tough balance for you to strike, to know when to speak on an issue and when to sit back and remain quiet?
In 2016, we had a hurricane. We're trying to solve a problem. I was probably less accessible, and as I look back at that particular experience, I didn't have the right balance. I think there is a balance to be struck. I'll be honest with you, there are times where I do things that I have to do. Like whether I want to give a speech yesterday to open up media days, that's been going on with commissioners for a number of decades. You're stuck with that. Now, I'd rather go sit by the lake and not worry about what I'm going to say. Destin, we have a press conference every day, and there were a couple times, candidly, where the same questions with the same framing came at me, and I was kind of sick of it. And, I didn't talk about rat poison directly, but it was a rat poison-ish. I also think there is a strategy about communicating. I'll go back to COVID. When we were shutting down, this is one of the lessons from 2016. Before we made announcements, I said to our staff, I have to go explain myself. So we can hit send on the press release. We'll try to keep the information confidential, but I owe people an explanation. And so if you go back to Wednesday night, we moved people out of the stands. I was in the arena as the people were being told you won't come back tomorrow, explaining on TV why. I went to a press conference and put myself in front of everybody who wanted to ask me anything about it. And then Rudy Gobert happened, like right before I went on the stage. And all of a sudden you've committed to a press conference. The environment's changed completely. Now what do you do? So I think that's a representation of wanting to be genuine, wanting to communicate information. There are times when, I resist being the center of a conversation because I'll let that develop other ways, or I'm just tired of reading about something I said, quite frankly. How's that for an answer?
That's a great answer.
There's a balance in
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Hindsight being 2020, looking back on COVID in 2020 and the way you handled it was the right way to handle it now that we look back on it. And the way the Big Ten handled it was the wrong way to handle it, and they had to admit that pretty quickly. How scared were you or nervous during that decision making that you were going to be the one on the wrong side of history that made the wrong decision to try to push forward and play football and make sure that you were going to play sports?
I'm going to try to answer this in a succinct way.
Because
you
we
have
all
time
thought
limits.
differently
Yeah.
during it than we think now, right?
Yeah.
I think very few people felt the same way the entire time.
That's correct.
And I'm saying about COVID.
So a couple,
Right, right, right. The middle
a couple
of it,
data
yeah.
points for you. It hurt emotionally to stop our basketball tournament. Like that physically hurt, and I was emotional because I called coaches, all of our men's coaches, because we were playing. That was an emotional experience for me because I felt like I had failed. We were here, played after a tornado, played a doubleheader. We got the game in, and my grandfather was a pipeliner, and he taught me a mantra, which is a pipeliner always gets the job done. That's like getting the work done, getting the pipe in the ground, getting the oil or gas running, and we couldn't do it. So that hurt, and you question yourself because you're taking away opportunities. I can recall Georgia Tech at their arena, member of Georgia's basketball team, hugging the trophy after Georgia had won a complete upset that weekend of the tornado in 2008, saying, "This is the best day of my life. This is the best day of my life." And that's the responsibility you feel. So when we shut down, I felt that I had fallen short. Now, circumstances dictated that, so you have to turn the page and move on. Then as you walk through the season, Clay called me early on and said, hey, people are going to be in your way, putting up hurdles left and right, which was accurate. And so what we wanted to do in early May was say, we want to make our own decisions, control what we can control. When you go to early August, we had decided to keep trying to play. We changed our schedule June 30. It's a Thursday. August 6th, I get a call from the Pac-12 commissioner saying, we're not going to play. The Big Ten's not going to play. Others are thinking about it. Can we shut this thing down together? And I had just taken grief for who the opponents were in the 10-game conference schedule. I said, we just made this commitment. We pushed everything back. If you're asking, like, by Tuesday, will I cancel football? The answer is no. I won't do that just to do it together. We don't have to make that decision. And we said September 1st was kind of our go, no-go date. At that point, that was an incredibly intense weekend. My anchor point, just to bring it home. I had my annual big physical. My blood pressure was like perfect, 115/70 for my age. And my resting heart rate was good. So even in the midst of that stress, we had stayed connected. We had communicated.
This is where running marathons helps.
Yeah,
So.
and having good people around you. I'll also, on August 6th, when I got the call from the Pac-12, I called my chair, who was the president in Kentucky. And Dr. Capilouto said to me, I remember this vividly, he said, Commissioner, I don't know what we're going to do. What do you think? And I said, Dr. Capilouto, respectfully, I don't know how to answer that. I don't know how to ask the question, much less answer the question of just not playing football in this region right now. I said, I think we owe it to try. And that's what I said on that Monday. There's a statement you could go find. Basically, I said, look, are you going to be able to play? I don't know. I think that's honesty. But we're not going to stop trying right now. We've adjusted things. We didn't know how to test in our communities. And think about August 6th, we're going to come back to practice. We didn't know how to get through testing, and that was a public health protocol, not what we necessarily were going to do. But to play, you had to have a testing program, and we ramped that up in a matter of weeks. It is a pretty amazing experience. I told one of my staff, I said, if we can accomplish this, I think this will be the most significant accomplishment in the history of college football. Now we got this whole NIL thing and court decisions. Maybe it's second. But
good luck.
At the time, I did an interview with a member of the New York Times editorial board in early September, and I had all my talking points, not because somebody gave them to me, but I could tell you why we were trying. We had lost kids because they lost the locker room. They lost their community, which I talked about. They lost the regularity, where some drug test issues, some behavioral issues. You don't just push the pause button, come back in a year, and everything resets. I think that was one of the great misses in our culture. It's not like you just put everything up on the shelf, you wait around a year, and you come back and everything just restarts. And so I communicated that. And at the end of that interview, the New York Times editorial board member said, hey, really appreciate your input and perspective, but we've already written our piece, which was we shouldn't be playing football. And whether we could or couldn't at that point was very much up in the air. The issue of not attempting to, that's where I felt the responsibility.
No doubt.
America's divided with everything right now, and I think college football fans in America are divided on how they feel about the relationship between you and Tony Petitti of the Big Ten. Half of America probably thinks that you guys are the biggest of adversaries, hate each other, don't speak at all. And another half of America thinks you're probably a part of some secret cabal that gets together and pulls the strings on everything, and not just football, but all sports, and that you're calling all the shots. What's the truth?
Well, the truth is, Tony's the son of a New York City police officer from Queens. My dad was a welder. I'm from outside Syracuse, New York. Like, there isn't any conspiratorial linkages there that you can even in any way conjure up.
You're not in the Illuminati.
No, that's exactly
okay,
right. That's exactly
record.
right. No trilateralist commission or whatever else there was out there back in the day, Council on Foreign Relations. I actually think we're two guys from pretty blue-collar backgrounds. I enjoy talking to Tony. We were on a video conference with our colleagues from the ACC and Big 12 today. We talked probably 4 out of 5 days last week. We're going to have disagreements. I think Tony and I both are fine with that. I don't think either of us are trying to outposition. We're just trying to communicate the why. And I was asked on the network today about like a rift. And I'm like, there's no rift. There's actually really healthy communication. We haven't said we're not going to look more at AQs, for example, and that's something the Big Ten has said. What we said is we're interested in that model. We think there are other things that should be addressed first and may get us to a healthy model before we have to go to that, because I think explaining some of the allocations that would come is a difficult challenge. So we're going to have disagreement. We're going to have a lot of agreement because of the expectations, the resources, the visibility of our programs. What I think we will continue to have is a healthy working relationship.
How are we going to see championship weekend for football change, or will we?
Well, it depends on that format issue. I think we're still positioning for a conference championship, which has meaning. That whole "it just means more" thing relates to being an SEC champion. And hey, Georgia wanted to win a national championship, but there's absolute pride in that they were the conference champion last year.
Could you do that in the regular season?
Well, so it's an ad hoc answer.
Okay.
Maybe, maybe not. You could have teams that all finish with the same record in a single division that don't play each other, and the answer is no. You have a bunch of tri-champions and quad champions. There's a rallying point around football. So right now, it doesn't have to change. If you talk, and we've talked about this AQ thing and having that championship Saturday be populated with conference games and the winners of those conference games in advance, kind of a play-in to the playoff. We're not wedded to that. Our coaches didn't react favorably to yet another SEC opponent on their schedule.
But that gives them, if you're a 10 seed, you have a chance to win.
Gives you hope. Yep, that's why.
That's
why when I
Keeps you
say, we have interest in these other models, but we're not committed to them. So we have interest, and we'll see if ideas mature.
Get back to your Freemason meetings.
Well, I was trying to figure out how to approach the answer to that question.
What does Beyonce and Jay-Z think about the college football playoff? Well, I know you guys were hanging out last night here in town.
So I will say, Tony worked for CBS and ABC, so he knew a lot of our folks. I met him when he worked for Major League Baseball. He was in a meeting with Rob Manfred when I went up just to talk about collegiate baseball. This was pre-COVID, really well thought of by a number of our staff who knew him for a long time. Tony came to see me week or two after he was hired and just formed the basis of a relationship. And again, I don't think we should see everything the same way.
Sure.
I think we make each other better through the kind of thoughtful conversation, strategic disagreement. Maybe you have to put pause on issues. What I can commit to is what we won't try to work through things between the two of us. And I will tell you, in my 10 years as a commissioner, I have been in commissioners' meetings with ideas where people simply shut down. They don't engage in problem solving. And I think the reality is the two of us, the four of us, and the 32 of us, when you think about all the Division I conferences, hey, I think we'll all try to work through the problems together. Eventually, somebody has to make a decision. It might be weighted more towards us at that point, but we'll certainly collaborate with people.
For the good of the game.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know what that
is. Yeah. Well, that's where I reacted in Destin. Like, what's your responsibility for the game? And, there had been 2 press statements issued by colleagues about responsibility for the good of the game. And I'm like, hey, guys, Clemson's not in the playoff if we don't expand last year.
Yeah.
And neither is SMU, and neither is Arizona State. In fact, it would have been 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams, and we never had unanimity
Yep.
on the issue of going from 4 to 12. And so when people want to lecture me about responsibility for the game, I'm like, hey, defense exhibit 1 is we expanded the playoff, which gave you opportunities. Sure, Tennessee had an opportunity, great for them.
And a bye.
But it gave you the opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's how I look at some of that criticism and commentary.
We reacted
Prepared
the same way.
statements that brag about what you're doing for the game, that's always fun.
We reacted
when it's
the same
always
way.
written
Yeah.
out in advance.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thanks
Absolutely,
for the time and being kind to the
thank
show
you
as
so
always,
much.
man.
Dinner at some nice restaurant in Nashville.
Yeah, let's do it
We'll
soon.
do that again. And
Yeah.
Clay can pay for it.
Yeah.
That's the best part.
yes. Whenever Clay invites, we always say yes. 'cause he usually
No
picks
doubt,
it
man.
up.
Okay.
Hey, stay tuned. More coming here on Hot Mic.